Let's start by going over some of the phrases that you learned in the last lesson again. Do you remember that I am translates to yo soy? We are is nosotros somos. Informally, you are is tú eres. Its plural form translates to vosotros sois. Formally, you are becomes usted es, and its plural form translates to ustedes son. He or she is él or ella es. And lastly, they are becomes ellos or ellas son. Let's revise the interrogations we looked at in the last lesson. What translates to qué, and which becomes cuál. Here are the phrases we went over the last time. I am Mark becomes yo soy Mark. My name is Mark translates to mi nombre es Mark. I am a boy is soy un chico. I am a student becomes soy un estudiante. I'm from Chicago translates to yo soy de Chicago. Great! Today we will learn the forms of some regular verbs and use them in conversations. So let's get started. So here's today's conversation between two people, Lisa and Mark. Lisa, hello, what is your name? Mark, hello, my name is Mark, and you? Lisa, I am Lisa. Lisa, where do you study? Mark, I study in America. Mark, where do you work? Lisa, I work at the hospital. For us to complete this conversation, we will need to understand the forms of verbs in Spanish and how they change their form depending on the subject. Let's start with the types of verbs. In Spanish, we classify verbs in 4 groups: regular verbs ending in AR, regular verbs ending in ER, regular verbs ending in IR, and lastly, irregular verbs. Just like in English, where verbs change forms depending on the subject, for example, I eat, she eats, etc., verbs change forms in Spanish as well. However, the forms of verbs in Spanish have many more variations. Let's look at these. In this lesson, we will look at the variations of verbs ending in AR. You don't need to memorize each verb at this point in time, but it is important to understand how verbs change forms. Let's look at some examples of common regular verbs with AR ending. To walk is caminar. To study translates to estudiar. To teach becomes enseñar. Can you try that? Enseñar. Great. To work translates to trabajar. To ask is preguntar. Can you try that? Preguntar. To take becomes tomar. And lastly, to answer translates to contestar. Notice that the J in trabajar takes up the sound of H. So try that again. Trabajar. Very good. All right, it's quiz time. To study translates to estudiar, trabajar, or tomar. Is it the first or the second? Or maybe it's the third. The correct answer is estudiar. To study translates to estudiar. Very good. Quiz time. What is the right translation for to take? Is it caminar, or trabajar, or tomar? The correct answer is tomar. To take is tomar. Did you get that right? Now can you try what to work translates to? Does it translate to trabajar? Or is it contestar? Or enseñar? To work is trabajar. How did you do on this one? What is the right translation for the verb to ask? Is it preguntar or contestar? Or will it be enseñar? To ask is preguntar. One more time. Preguntar. So remember, to walk translates to caminar. To study is estudiar. As we saw, to teach becomes enseñar. To work translates to trabajar. To ask becomes preguntar. To take is tomar. And lastly, to answer translates to contestar. All right, now let's learn how to use such verbs in conversations by learning the different forms they take. To start using these verbs in conversations, we will need to understand the forms they take depending on the subject. Let's learn this by taking the example of to walk or caminar. To walk translates to caminar. Let's learn its forms. With yo or I, caminar becomes camino. Can you try that? Camino. With nosotros, which means we, caminar changes to caminamos. Informally, with tú or you, it becomes caminas. And for its plural form, vosotros, we use camináis. Try that again. Camináis. Formally, with usted, which is the formal translation of you, caminar changes to camina. Did you get that? Camina. And for ustedes, which is the formal and plural form of you, we use caminan. With él or ella, which means he or she, caminar changes to camina. And lastly, for ellos or ellas, which means they, the form is caminan. All these forms may look overwhelming at first, but ultimately you will find this simple and it will help you get the right base for all your conversational needs. Here are some tricks to help you remember these forms. If you notice, the forms for formal form of second person and third person are exactly the same. So if you noticed, verbs ending in AR transform in the following way. With usted, they end in A. And with ustedes, they end in AN, which is exactly the same as how they change with third person pronouns. With él or ella, they end in A. And for ellos or ellas, they take up the ending of AN. Let's revise. I walk translates to yo camino. We walk is nosotros caminamos. Informally, you walk becomes tú caminas. And its plural form is vosotros camináis. Formally, you walk translates to usted camina. And in plural form, it is ustedes caminan. Moving on, he or she walks becomes él or ella camina. And lastly, they walk is ellos or ellas caminan. Excellent. So let's revise and take a note of how verbs change their forms. With yo or I, AR ending changes to O. For plural form, nosotros or we, AR becomes amos. Informally, for tú or you, AR changes its form to AS. And in its plural form, vosotros, we have the ending ais. Formally, for usted, AR changes to A. And for ustedes, to AN. Similarly, as we saw in third person singular, that is él or ella, the ending AR becomes A. And for ellos or ellas, it becomes AN. All right, time to practice. Try translating I study, where the verb to study translates to estudiar. I study translates to yo estudio. How will you say you study? Assume informal singular form. We will say tú estudias. Did you get that right? Now try you study in the formal and singular form. Formally, you study translates to usted estudia. Now try I travel, where to travel is viajar. I travel becomes yo viajo. How do we translate I work, where the verb to work is trabajar? I work becomes yo trabajo. Try to pick the right option for these sentences. How will you translate she dances? Will it be ella baila or él baila, or is it ella bailo? She dances translates to ella baila. Now try saying they visit Colombia. Will you say ustedes visitan Colombia, or usted visita Colombia, or ellos visitan Colombia? They visit Colombia becomes ellos visitan Colombia. Now let's look at today's conversation again. Lisa. Hello, what is your name? Mark. Hello, my name is Mark, and you? Lisa. I am Lisa. Lisa. Where do you study? Mark. I study in America. Mark. Where do you work? Lisa. I work at the hospital. Let's look at the interrogation where. Where translates to donde, and to where is a donde. Let's look at some more new words needed in a conversation. At translates to en. In becomes en. The, when used with masculine subjects, is el. In Spanish, articles like a, the, and an change forms depending on the gender of the subject. We will look at their forms in future lessons. Let's break our conversation down and learn it step by step. Hello, what is your name? Translates to Hola, ¿cuál es tu nombre? In response, hello, my name is Mark, and you becomes Hola, mi nombre es Mark. ¿Y tú? Did you notice that E is used for and? Hence, hello, my name is Mark, and you becomes Hola, mi nombre es Mark. ¿Y tú? As we know, I am Lisa is yo soy Lisa. Now let's look at where do you study, which translates to ¿Dónde estudias? In response, I study in America becomes yo estudio en América. Did you notice that estudias is the right form of estudiar with second person that is the informal form of you? Estudio is the form of estudiar with first person or I. Hence, where do you study translates to ¿Dónde estudias? And I study in America becomes yo estudio en América. Where do you work translates to ¿Dónde trabajas? Its response, I work at the hospital, becomes yo trabajo en el hospital. Did you notice that trabajas is the right form of trabajar with second person, and trabajo is the correct form of trabajar with first person or I? Hence, where do you work translates to ¿Dónde trabajas? And I work at the hospital becomes yo trabajo en el hospital. Notice that the hospital becomes el hospital, as hospital is considered masculine, which is why I work at the hospital translates to yo trabajo en el hospital. So here's what we learned today. Hello, what is your name? Translates to Hola, ¿cuál es tu nombre? Hello, my name is Mark, and you? Is Hola, mi nombre es Mark, ¿y tú? I am Lisa is yo soy Lisa. Where do you study becomes ¿Dónde estudias? I study in America is yo estudio en América. Where do you work translates to ¿Dónde trabajas? And lastly, I work at the hospital is yo trabajo en el hospital. All right, it's now time for our culture leaf of the day. In formal contexts, gifts are not typically exchanged at initial business meetings. Usually, gifts are given only at the conclusion of successful negotiations. If you are invited to a Spaniard's house, bring the host or hostess a gift such as chocolates, pastries, or a bottle of wine. If they have children, bring one gift especially for them. Ensure that the gifts are beautifully wrapped. Flowers are usually given in odd numbers, but not 13. And avoid giving dahlias, chrysanthemums, and white lilies, as some of these are used for funerals.